Thank you.
Good day to all. Hoping everyone is well and staying safe in these hard times the world has had to face over the last few months. I would like to thank ISCM for this opportunity. I would also like to thank my fellow speakers for accepting to participate in the web event. And last but not the least, I would like to thank the audience for showing up. I would like to request the speakers to keep their answers short and crisp. Global supply chains have been vastly affected during the ongoing pandemic and the resulting lockdowns. But were we void of disruptions before the pandemic? Scale and effects of the disruptions were varied in the pre-pandemic era, but they were as much a hurdle to our planning processes just as they are now. The unprecedented global impact of the pandemic has only brought to light the shortcomings of our planning processes and the absence of a sustainable and resilient supply chain design. We all lie when we say we didn't see a pandemic coming. Let's not forget just the scale and timing of it has taken us by shock. So why wasn't the supply chain designed for the large-scale pandemic? Why did we have so many supply disruptions during periods of lockdown? The answer is rooted in our supply design. This brings me to my first question of the day. Would you have done things differently in the past if you knew about the pandemic and the resulting lockdown before it happened?
So, yeah. Hi, Subbu. Hi, Shanmukh. Yeah. So, that's in the very recent past, this really hit in the sense that we are now in the second lockdown in India, right? Across India, we can see that there's a big disruption which is coming. And we were just coming back and thinking of, did we learn any lessons during the last 1 year? Have we done anything different, which is helping us in navigate this current lockdown, right? So that's how I'm trying to reach this. Two ways. One, yes, if I had known that a lockdown was coming in 2020, few things that I would have certainly done would have been on my supplier base, right? So if I had only one supplier across the world, I would have ensured that I get multiple suppliers. At least, even if I don't start sourcing, I've identified them and then I'm ready to bring them in as and when required. The second one is in terms of manufacturing. I would have ensured, fortunately, for example, Kellogg in India has got 2 factories, right? So would I have ensured flexibility between the 2 plants to manufacture any type of product that we do, rather than keeping them ready for only one type of product? So instead of scale, I would have probably ensured that my range manufacturing capabilities are enabled. The third one would have been build up a sort of a war chest, right? Get a cost and financial implication in place, which says that in case this happens, this is the type of cost that we may have to undertake, and therefore keep the business ready for a short-term absorption of higher costs. Those would be 3 things that, broadly from my side. Having done this, learned the lessons over the last year. Fortunately, when this started happening the last 7 days back, our response time has been much shorter. Right, so within the first 2 or 3 days, we've got a crisis management in place. We've got the actions already set out. We've got a previous list which is again brought out, refreshed, and then said tick, tick, tick. Have we done these things? So in that sense, I think it's been both. What would I have done different? Have I done it, and is it helping me today? Does it mean that the disruption is completely managed? No. I think the disruption keeps taking new and different forms, but are we better prepared? I think that's where the answer comes. Yes, we are slightly better prepared than we were earlier.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, Subbu here. Yeah, maybe just to add on to what Saurabh said, irrespective of this pandemic or not, how do we need to design our supply chain? Maybe it's what I would have done differently. This pandemic came, it expedited the way maybe we are thinking differently today, right? But that's how the default approach should have been. So what we are doing today is reacting to certain events that is happening. Yes, we are learning how to react faster, how to react better. But what is the biggest learning that I would have taken or I would take from this pandemic is how I'm going to relook into the way a supply chain organization, a supply chain framework is set up to address different industry, different customer base. I think that's the starting point. Does all industry need to have the same kind of setup? Do we need to be globalized for every single industry? Do we need to localize? Where do we find the balance between localization and globalization in terms of logistics, in terms of production, in terms of delivering the products, right? Maybe these are some of the aspects that I would really look into, assess, and then co-create. And when I talk about co-create, how do we co-create this with our customers, who are maybe the biggest stakeholders for any organization, right? That's where maybe, had I known something like this is going to happen, apart from managing inventory management better, demand planning better, supply planning better, I would really start looking into, are we set up in the right way to handle something as big as this, or maybe even some smaller risk that might happen in the future. That would be the biggest difference I would take in from this.
So one more thing, that as you started saying, how would I have designed my supply chain better? I think the key point which comes out is a flow of information. Right. So last time, suddenly when everything disappeared, you had no demand information, you had no supply information, you had no transport information, perhaps. Right. And therefore, companies which had not invested in adequate and fast information flow across their network, they were the ones which took more time. So even for me, for example, we lost 100 trucks for a month because we didn't know where those trucks were. Right. We needed a little bit of a time to understand what my inventory levels are at various places, because people are not able to reach. So I don't even know when was the last closing inventory. Therefore, one big piece is around information flow, maybe through control towers. And I've been, looking at some of the companies which have done this very well, which is to say, you can take decisions faster if you have the right data on hand. Right. I think that's one big piece to be put there. The last bit, again, I liked about what you said about localization and globalization, right? And a corollary to do that would be, and like you said on supply chain design, are you a reactive supply chain or are you an active supply chain? So are you still waiting for the demand numbers and trying to improve your demand planning process, rather than saying, okay, demand planning helps me do 1, 2, 3, but my actual execution happens on a day-to-day basis for which the demand can exist. So possibly that's one more design change which can happen in a supply chain, which can help you become more resilient.
And thank you, both of you. This question is a bit similar to the previous one, but this is more of a present day scenario that I want to gauge. What are the changes that have been made to the planning processes since the pandemic first struck in your organizations?
Structurally,
I got what your desires were.
Yes.
Go on.
Structurally, not a significant change, because that is not possible within the space with which we need to react, right? What significantly changed is what Saurabh came across with: control tower, data availability, and how do we create this transparency across the value chain, right? By doing that, what we did was we really cut down on the decision-making process or the decision-making time, I would say at least by 20-30%. By doing this, we are able to really prioritize where the resources need to be allocated, where do we need to move the material, point A to point B, take the consideration of the business criticality, the customer's criticality, and act based on that. So what we changed a lot, really respond fast by clear data availability. It's not just data. Actually, we took the knowledge of the information from the data, and then we had very close collaboration with multiple functions until the point of reaching the customer with that information, right? That really was one big change we did, and we really created this end-to-end transparency. As Saurabh said, some organizations are quite advanced compared to the rest, right? In my organization, we have wealth of information. The infrastructure in terms of the systems and the tools are very, I would say, in an advanced stage. And I come from an agricultural solution, which is highly seasonal business, where the customer's infrastructure is not as advanced as maybe bigger organizations. So it's extremely important to have this data available. Where do I have the inventory? Where can I move it? So that was the biggest change that we did in the last 1 year, which enabled us to respond fast, mitigate the impacts to business, or to ensure that the business continuity was there. And it also enabled us, okay, this month I'm working like this, but I already have this information. How do I work better in the coming months? So it enabled us also to evolve a little bit more faster within that space of 12 months, let's say. So now when the Suez Canal happened, maybe we are a little bit more prepared than what we were 12 months before. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, a great question, and I think Subbu has covered it well. I wanted to get into a slightly bit more detail in terms of planning, right? What it helped me do personally, and what it helped the company was to seed the thought that planning happens in different horizons and planning happens in different ways. So there's the forecasting, there's a demand planning, and there's a supply planning. It helps seed that you cannot execute to the demand plan, right? So the demand, I mean, on the shorter horizon, on a day-to-day basis, on a week basis, you cannot be executing to the demand plan because the demand plan is inherently, it is inaccurate, right? So what changed for us was, number one, we brought forecasting and demand planning to the forefront, but we extended the horizon to help us understand what would be the impact of inventory levels over a longer period of time, what would be my capacity utilizations, what is my raw material, packing material coverage, especially for the imported and other items. So that was one big part which says that horizon expanded. The second one we did was to shrink the horizon for our supply planning or our distribution planning, which we shrunk down almost to a day, right? And I'll come to one very important piece. You cannot shrink it down if you're doing it manually, right? So again, picking up from what Subbu said, data flow, we moved to something to DDMRP base. So the demand, whatever had been sold yesterday, that information was translated into a manufacturing plan within 24 hours, right? Did we change the plan in the production cycle within the 24 hours? Not always, but it helped guide us to say what are the changes which are required, and therefore the plant could consistently and continuously prepare. And like I said, the distribution plan was, this has been sold, this is what we need to replenish. So that was the second change in terms of supply plan. The third one was how fast can you shrink down your range of products that you are offering to make and sell only what is really the customers and consumers are asking for, and then how fast can you bring it back again to get the range when things have normalized, right? So that type of a flexibility wherein the sales, the marketing, the finance, and the supply chain teams need to work very coherently, and this is like a temporary delisting of certain SKUs and then bringing in new SKUs again, that sort of a thing. So that was the third thing which happened. Lastly, all of this is not possible unless you are digitized. So the speed at which we are doing digitization across the board, from the top level, what the CEO sees on his dashboards, what the sales guy sees, what the marketing person sees, and how does the supply chain execute, that has become the top piece. I remember in one such conference a year back to the day, people were talking about, lockdowns have happened. How are you now executing? And people said, we have gone back to instinct. We have gone back to WhatsApp. We have gone back to phone calls. And I think that is can be the most damaging to a business. So the speed at which we have digitized, again, Subbu keeps saying transparency of data has been the next big change, which has helped drive efficiencies.
Thank you. Coming to the next question. How effectively were you able to use supply chain planning during and post the lockdowns? And do you see supply chain planning as a strategic function for the future?
So supply, for example, if I take my own industry, right? I come from agriculture background where the market is volatile, but the infrastructure or the production network is long lead time based network. Predominantly, we bring a lot of material from other regions into APAC, right? So how did we manage the planning? The horizon shift that Saurabh was mentioning earlier happened in our case also. Despite the fact that we have a very long lead time, what we started to do was, let's focus on what is going to happen in the next 3 months, right? So the planning structurally didn't change, or the way we did demand forecasting, the way we did supply planning, the way we did inventory management, these things didn't change too much. There were some minor adjustments here and there, but it was the same. What we did was, how did we execute our planning? That's where the biggest change happened. And this is where, with what Saurabh said, right? The focus on key products, key market, key customers started to become more and more relevant. Communicating this information, starting from customer to us, and from us to our source or to the procurement or to our suppliers, and then translating this as product availability and putting it in the right place became very critical. What we significantly worked on in terms of planning is our logistics and procurement planning, right? So even though our organization has that as part of the third-party service providers are the ones who deliver it for us, our interactions with our LSPs became much more stronger, much more immediate, and it was also very fast in terms of responding to changes. Today, a vessel is booked, it gets the vessel is not available anymore because there is a congestion of demand. There's significant demand, and the vessel availability was too less. But we enable that these kind of discussions happen much more faster, not only over the phone or over email, but also through the system itself, where when the change happens, then the change gets reflected. So we are able to react to the change, and we are able to trigger the next action that needs to be done. So that's what we did in terms of the planning part. I'll come to the strategy. Do we see supply chain as a core strategic function? We will come to that later after listening to Saurabh's comment on this planning aspect, because I think that's much more fascinating to discuss.
Yeah. Thanks, Subbu. So completely agree with you, and really happy to hear what you have done. The key point is, you asked, is it going to remain strategic, right? And I do believe this is going to be extremely strategic, even if at least for the next 5 to 10 years, as I foresee it, we are going to get more digitized. We are probably getting to get more AI, ML based, right? But I don't think that in the short horizon that is available, these type of disruptive activities can be managed entirely by machines, right? And you can build in, for what I see in the near future is going to be a mix of human and machines, what I like to call as human assisted algorithms, which means your day-to-day tasks are automated, and they are handled by machines, by whatever automation system that you're built in. And then the 20% which is left over, right, is where the humans bring in their experience, they're bringing their understanding of what is happening, they bring in the collaboration to try and make it better, right? This may decrease in the future, but I don't think it's going to go away entirely. How much do you understand? For example, if you're putting up, let's say, Nielsen data from the market to understand how the consumer is acting, right? What are they buying? How does that translate into what the plant should be producing, right? Will it be automated in the future? I'm not really talking about a very long-term future where it would probably be. But for this time, someone needs to talk to the sales team to say, okay, this is what the consumer is buying. Do you see them moving into a modern trade? And I'm coming from an FMCG point of view. Or do you see them moving into an e-commerce? Okay, if it is going to modern trade, which of the chains is it going to? So what are you doing to tack onto this behavior? That's part of work, which is between a demand planning and a forecasting with multiple different functions coming together. It has to coalesce somewhere. So a demand planner will coalesce into an actual demand or a projected demand, but then the supply planner comes in, okay, to do this, this is the sort of algorithm that I will build into, which my teams should then work on. So that's what I see, that a supply planner's job, if anything, is going to become even more critical. And it has clearly shown that it is one of the most important functions within supply chain. We need more people coming into it. We need more people who can bring in a market intelligence, the collaboration piece, and we need more people at the same time who understand how to program machines or how to use the tools which are available to make this much more effective, to make it faster.
Yeah, thanks, Saurabh. So maybe just an add-on on the second question, Shanmukh, that you asked. Do I see supply chain as a strategic function in the future? I see supply chain as a strategic function even today. I mean, I saw it that way even in the past. Why do I say that? Because supply chain, just like commercial, R&D, regulatory operations, is a link of the same chain, which is to bring the right service, the right product to the customers. So for us, for an organization to be successful in delivering what a customer wants, I don't think it is possible if supply chain is not part of that entire strategic approach. How I see supply chain in an organization, it's kind of a hub in a wheel, because we are the hub, because we coordinate, maybe collaborate with the maximum functions within an organization to deliver the product. Second reason why I say we are the hub, we are kind of the data lake of an organization. We know what information is available, where we have the systems, that enables us to understand that we have the competence to also understand multiple systems, information in different stages of a value chain, and we are able to put all these things together and then make it into a very coherent information or knowledge that can be used. So for example, if I want to launch a new product in a given country, and I take agriculture as an industry, for me to ensure that the product is available there, there's a lot of factors that goes into it, right? What kind of e-commerce I need to have, what kind of commercial policies I need to have, what kind of demand interaction I need to have with the customer. But most importantly, what kind of a production setup I need to have, what kind of a supply chain setup I can have so that I deliver this to this customer, right? So to me, supply chain has to be core function of an organization. If it's a dedicated logistics and supply chain organization, it anyway is a core one, right? I'm talking about organizations where supply chain is one of the link of the whole chain, but it's as strategically important as a commercial organization is, or as an operation organization is, or an R&D is. That's how I see supply chain, and that's how I see it going forward. And here I'm talking about not just within the organization. Why can't supply chain extend beyond the organization and go to the customer directly? It's already happening. And we did this also within BASF in agricultural world, where farmers tend to be the most conservative of the customers, right? But there are instances where this communication is already happening. So yeah, I see a big scope where supply chain can really expand, both in terms of the scope and also in terms of the long-term, medium-term strategy that is developed by a group or by an organization.
Thank you, Subbu. Moving away from supply chain planning to supply chain designing, what do you think are the aspects that need to be considered when designing a supply chain?
That's a very core question. You're basically saying obviously all the usual answers are going to be there. Where are your customers based? Where are your suppliers based? Where is your manufacturing? You know, what type of a product and what type of an industry you are. All those are, you know, standard textbook pieces. Let me try to change the question a little bit to say, what changes would you do to your supply chain, right, to prepare for different types of disruptions? And I'm saying this today, we are in a particular type of a disruption, right? It's industry wide, it is worldwide, it is spread across, it impacts everyone from top to bottom, but we don't know what are the next type of disruptions which are going to happen tomorrow, right? So last time we had seen something, maybe there was a financial disruption. Right now what we are seeing, there's a ship stuck in the Suez Canal, and I think that was the biggest news for supply chain people across. I think every company started off a BCP the day they got to know that a ship is stuck in the Suez Canal. So what's the next big thing which is going to happen? Is it going to be global or annual, month-led, or many months that the disruption is going to happen? Or is it going to be a small one which is going to be maybe 5 days, 10 days, right? Again, I think the core thing, like Subbu had said earlier, it's about what is the supplier base, what is the type of flexibility, what is the localization versus globalization that you are going to follow, what is the cost structure that you are willing to live with, because each of these decisions is going to have a cost impact, right? Today, supply chains also control some of the largest cost base within a company, right? So are you going to willing to increase that cost? Are you willing to pass on that cost to a consumer? Is he willing to pay for that cost? For your resilience or your ability to withstand disruption is going to come at some sort of a cost. If you're going to build flexibility, you're going to possibly put in more lines. Maybe you'll need to train more people, right? Maybe you'll need to open more hubs for distribution, right? Because if you have 1 mega hub and that area goes into a lockdown, what are you going to do around it, right? Or if there's an earthquake, what are you going to do around it? I think those are the answers, and there's no single answer which will say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which will be applicable across industries. Very simply put, look at your supplier base, ensure that how many of your raw material, packing material are single source supplies, right? Number 2, look at the geographical distribution. Are most of them imported, so there is a 2-month to a 3-month sea time, or most of them are local, right? So that would be one set. Second would be, are your manufacturing plants flexible, or they are only built for scale? So can you build in some modular pieces where you can build in some amount of flexibility? Look at your people training base, right? Are there people very strongly focused on a single type of a job, or do they have multi-skilling which is built in? Look at your distribution. Are you looking at mega distribution centers, or are you willing to, you know, at least break it up into 2 or 3 parts, so that again you're protected on that sense? And the last bit would be, are you digitized or you're not digitized? Are you the right amount of digitization, or is it that there's just too much information flowing around, so everyone is now, you know, sinking into a sea of data which is there? Those will be 3 or 4 pointers, in my opinion, which one should look at.
Yeah, maybe just to add on to what Saurabh said, the supply chain network design, which is our operational footprint, our warehousing footprint, these are like the standard. This will be a core discussion anyway that happens in every organization, right? But how would I define supply chain design versus supply chain planning? Maybe 3 components. Supply chain, the first word that everyone thinks is operations. I do my task today, I react, I close it, I move on to my next task. So to me, a supply chain design should be both. One is operational focus. So you have a supply chain, and I'm talking within the same supply chain organization. You have one pillar that focuses on the planning aspect, that focuses on the execution aspect, that focuses on the logistics and coordination. The second aspect of the design, in my opinion, would be medium-term to long-term view. How do we, within the supply chain organization, develop supply chain excellence initiatives that add value to the business, that add value to our customer? I remember from the previous panel discussion, Manish mentioned about rolling out IBP, and why IBP rollout is not a functional topic, but it's a business-driven initiative, right? So we need to have a group of people who are the experts in these kind of excellence initiatives, be it digital, be it tools, be it process improvement, be it looking ahead with the trends that's going to come into the supply chain world, and how do we leverage all these things and make ourselves better, so that this team will enable the operational team to perform better. The third aspect of a design that I would see is a very strong risk management process. How comprehensive is the supply chain risk management or the operations risk management that we have, which would enable us to capture the risks that we know will happen, so we can prepare the mitigation measure, like what Saurabh said. Do I have the right plan? Do I produce it in one place, or do I have a backup supplier? Do I need to have multiple distribution? These are maybe some of the risks that we can immediately mitigate, but also have a risk portfolio that is a little bit more far-reaching, like a pandemic. What did we learn from this pandemic? So how do we respond to the future pandemic? So that's how I would define a supply chain design as a whole: operations, excellence, risk management matrix, apart from the obvious topics which we will discuss.
Thank you, Subbu.
Excellent way of putting it, Subbu. Really, I really liked it. I've actually noted it down. A short term, which is your day-to-day or week-to-week. Medium term is how do you improve your supply chain performance, and last bit about risk management. Perfectly put. Thank you.
Thanks.
Exactly what the question meant. Thank you, Subbu. Coming back to your second point, how can the supply chain people collaborate effectively while using the tools of supply chain design and supply chain planning in a synchronized manner to deliver optimal outcomes in the next new normal and the new normals that are to follow the next one?
Subbu, you want to pick this with?
Okay, so maybe I will go back to what Manish said in the previous, and actually quite a few of the panelists mentioned. It's all about, so the data, the control tower, the design, it's all there, which is to provide us the information that's needed. But the most important aspect is connecting the dots. So how do we, so all this framework enables us to get us to a certain level of maturity level, right? But once we have the data there, once we know what is happening, once we understand what the trend is, how do we connect it across different functions? More importantly, how do we connect it back to what the customer wants, right? So this is what the tools are there for, to enable us to make these kind of decisions, right? So any tool, be it just the planning tool, be it the digital tools that we are implementing, or be it the tools that are developed just to create transparency, right? The point is, how do we take this data, how do we process it, and how do we collaborate it with our other functions? But always, all this information should tie back to what we as an organization wants to deliver to our customer at the end. And this would only happen if everybody are on the same understanding and everybody believe, yes, this adds value to our customer, which in turn adds value to our organization or to our business. And so to me, these are just the enablers. The design, the tools that we have are the enablers. So it's as if these enablers make us to make decision faster, to make us come to as right a decision as possible. I mean, you never know whether a decision is right or wrong until the outcome is there. But let's assume with the information available, are we making the right decision? Are we making it at the right time? And once we make a decision, do we stand with that decision, right? And if we realize that the decision is wrong, are we fast enough to react and change the decision? Maybe these are the key components that we need to take into consideration after the design is completed, and we move towards the planning and the implementation part. Yeah, Saurabh.
Thanks. So I just want to pick it up and state exactly, copy some of the things that you said. It's very, very important. And I think this is one very big change, Shanmukh, which I have seen personally. Today, when people went into that BCP mode, into that crisis management mode, and they're part of a team, they understood what the other function is looking for and why. Otherwise, it was always a lot of times us versus them. So sales guy wants this. Why does he want it? It doesn't sell. The supply chain guy has got his own intelligence, which he'll put in. Then the sales guy doesn't understand what are the issues that the supply guy is facing. Right? He says they are truck. What's the big deal about truck? But then he sees there are no trucks on the road. You are going to pay extra. So that thing, I'm calling it as shared knowledge. A very, very important piece is that you do have, like Subbu said, a shared objective, which is a business plan. And you have the shared knowledge, which means people across the functions understand the importance of what the other guy is doing. Why is he doing? So you don't have to always go and question them. You are able to anticipate and plan for it on your own. For example, if you have got an IBP process, let's say forecasting, right? You go to a sales guy and say, I'm doing forecasting. I do statistical forecasting, and this is what the output is. He says, I don't know what is statistical forecasting, right? So why should I trust the data you bring? Just because you're a demand planner, you're saying this is a statistical forecast. If we help him understand what forecasting is, how is it going to be more accurate at a product family level and less at a SKU level? Why should we forecast in a particular manner? It helps build that knowledge, right? Same way, if he says, this is the type of coverage that I'm going for, these are the type of shops that I want to cover, it builds the shared knowledge. Therefore, you need to keep it here. If he says my e-commerce is growing, but e-commerce has got 5 different places, they want to do a one-day delivery, they want to be in Amazon Fresh, then it helps the supply chain guy to understand how to build the supply chain around it. So the first stage, I'm putting it as shared knowledge and a shared objective. The second one I'm saying is a structured meetings, right? Not ad hoc, not anything. So if you have an IBP process, stick to it with discipline. Follow that step, 5 steps, 6 steps, whatever you decide. Follow it with discipline, do the MOMs, follow up on what you learn from your failures, build it into the next one, listen to everyone, but do this structure, right? Don't do piecemeal. There are side meetings which are happening, decisions which don't flow throughout the organization. So the left hand doesn't know what the right is doing. The last bit, again, I think Subbu has talked about it multiple times. This is all to be around transparent data, right? Not enormous amounts of data, but transparent, structured data, which helps you make common decisions, which helps you make faster decisions. And in the tools which Subbu called as enablers are very, very important. If I can collaborate on a single sheet, right? For example, you use the Google Docs and you open one worksheet there. Everyone who changes the numbers can see it together. If I extrapolate it and say I use an SAP or an Anaplan web-based solution where everyone works on it together, there's a single source of truth. There's a single changes, whatever you do, everyone can see it visible. That is going to help enable the planning for the future. So shared knowledge, structured meeting, transparent data, and good use of tools and enablers. I think those would be 4 big things that I would push for.
Thank you. This brings me to the last question of the day. Are we ready for the next disruption, or are we still lagging? The increasing incidence rate of disruptions means the next disruption is going to take place soon. Can we plan or design our supply chains for this?
So were we better prepared for a disruption which happened within a year? I think most of the companies were better prepared. They were able to respond better. You don't see that much panic. That was also due to collective knowledge which we gained during the next year. What happens after 10 years? This knowledge is lost, right? So people who were there in 2008 would not, are not at the same place today. So people 10 years down the line, are we prepared? I don't think so, right? Will this knowledge be lost? It would be lost, right? As leaders, one of our key responsibilities is to teach the next level of people who follow us. What did we do? Codify it, put it down, share this knowledge openly so that the next level of leaders who come in have learned the lessons and they are better prepared for it. Are we prepared for multiple disruptions which will happen? I don't think we'll ever be prepared for the type of disruption which can happen. Tomorrow there's going to be a war. Maybe a border is going to be closed. Like we saw just now, right? The Suez Canal got closed. What happens? The shipping industry is in doldrums. It has been almost 3 to 4 months that it has been happening. We are paying 3-4 times the cost, right? We thought it will improve by the Chinese New Year. It has not. Now it has been pushed out for another 2 months. Is that disruption going to go away tomorrow? What's the next one? I don't think we can prepare for it. But the core principles, if you have applied strongly enough, if you have shared the knowledge, if people are prepared mentally, and I think the biggest piece operating person here thing is going to be people. Are people prepared to respond rather than getting scared and running away from the challenges which happen? That's going to be very important. So for me, talking about the core principles, build your supply chain on certain principles, help your people understand those principles and execute it, do a lot of digitization, those same things what we discussed over the last 3 or 4 questions. That's going to be important to keep prepared, but I really don't know how much. Would it be a 50-60%? I think that's where we'll end up. You're never going to be 100% prepared.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to everything that Saurabh said, right? So maybe I'll just add on a couple of points. Even when we do a risk management profiling, there's always one component where we say these risks, we just accept, we react, and we move on, right? So will we be ever 100% prepared for risks that comes in the future? Maybe no. But what we need to be always prepared for is, did we learn from the previous risk? Did we look into the way supply chain design, does it fit? Did we evolve from where we were in the past? And then does this new evolved supply chain design, does it align with our business requirement? Does it align with our customer needs? That's the maximum learning that you can take from your experiences, right? Most important aspect which Saurabh said is, how do we then archive these know-how, these knowledge, and then you pass it on to the next generation, right? That's the most important aspect of leadership, right? How do we ensure that the next in line people are fully aware of what happened? But will this make us 100% risk proof? Most likely no. So that's where the second component comes, which is highly people driven. Are we agile? Are we adaptable? Right? Are we flexible? And the last 1 year has shown it is possible for us to do all these things. Are we highly collaborative with others? When a crisis comes, people generally become more collaborative because everybody understands the common. So now everyone understands there's a common goal when crisis happens, right? So now the point is, how do we take this common goal and translate it into our normal day life? Why do we need to wait for a crisis to happen to replicate the same, right? So that's the second component which we can always take forward, ensure that this is there in the entire organization and it is there in the future organization who will follow us. So that would enable us to design our supply chain to accommodate all the risks that we have already experienced, possible risks that we can predict or foresee. But the second component, which is the people component, is the most important one that will enable us to overcome new risk, which is of different magnitude, of different nature. But if these two exist in an organization, I think we should be more or less there to continue surviving, to continue to move on, and to continue to evolve.
Thank you, Subbu. Thank you, Saurabh. To conclude, I would like to point out that the COVID threat was just another warning to global supply chains and humanity at large. It is not only exposed fragility in our systems, but human nature at large lies bare. We need to constantly innovate and collaborate to build anti-fragile systems, because in face of disruption lies the real opportunity to gain competitive advantage through strategy and design. How to get started? Invite the right set of people to participate, identify assumptions, drivers, uncertainties, risks, and floaters. Imagine plausible but dramatically different futures. Inhabit those futures. Isolate strategies that will help you navigate the multiple plausible futures and ingrain the process. Thank you, everyone.